Key elements of a successful podcast network. What it takes to build yours on this episode of Legit Podcast Pro. Welcome to another episode of Legit Podcast Pro, where I share tips, strategies, and information to help creative folks like you make your content, have your impact, and achieve influence without fear or worry about the legal stuff. I'm your host, Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. And this week, we're going to be talking about podcast networks. You know, podcasting has revolutionized the way we consume audio content. And as the industry continues to flourish and grow, creating a successful podcast network has become a really enticing opportunity for content creators and entrepreneurs. You know, a podcast network provides a platform to host multiple shows, catering to diverse audiences and expanding the reach of each individual podcast. But building a thriving network requires careful consideration of a whole bunch of key elements and a handful of legal things. So today, I'm going to explore some of those essential components that are critical for creating a successful network, and I'll touch on those legal considerations as well. So let's just jump right in and get started. Compelling content. You know, the cornerstone of a successful podcast network lies in its ability to deliver compelling content that captivates the target audience. It starts with defining a clear niche or theme for your network, identifying a specific area of interest like science or storytelling, finance, health, history, sports, enables you to target a dedicated community of listeners. Curating a diverse range of engaging shows within your network for that particular niche or audience is vital to attracting and retaining listeners. So you want to seek out talented hosts and creators that are passionate about the subject and have a unique perspective to offer. You want to conduct thorough research and vetting to know and ensure that those folks' expertise and communication skills align with your network's vision. And then by assembling this team of passionate individuals who consistently deliver high-quality content, you create a network that resonates with listeners and keeps them coming back for more. Number 2 is strong branding and marketing. Building a successful network requires effective branding and marketing strategies so you can establish a recognizable identity and promote your shows. Develop a cohesive visual identity for your network, a memorable logo, consistent color palette, captivating artwork for each show. This kind of unified branding approach helps to create a sense of professionalism and builds brand recognition. Invest in marketing efforts to promote your network and individual shows to a broader audience. Use social media platforms to engage with potential listeners, share engaging content, and foster a community around your network. Develop a content marketing strategy that includes regular blog posts and guest appearances on other podcasts and collaborations with relevant influencers. Because by strategically promoting your network and leveraging various marketing channels, you can attract new listeners and expand your network's reach. Number 3, technological infrastructure and distribution. Having a solid tech infrastructure and an efficient distribution channel is essential for smooth operation of your podcast network. You want to make sure you invest in reliable recording equipment and editing software and ensure high quality audio production across all your shows, and you have to make sure they do the same. Consistency in the audio quality is really important and crucial for keeping listeners and building, again, a reputable brand. Choose a reliable hosting platform that offers robust analytics, easy syndication to all the major podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and monetization options. Centralizing your network's shows on a single hosting platform simplifies management and allows for cross-promotion between those shows. And please consider partnerships and collaborations with other networks or platforms to expand your reach and attract new listeners. Plus, you're going to have a host that makes it not just possible, but preferably easy to get programmatic and dynamically inserted ads into your network's programming. So be especially careful because not all platforms are created equal, and you have to really read all the details, the terms and conditions carefully, and really do your due diligence. Otherwise, you might find yourself losing money or falling short of your obligations to your network and to the show's creators and the audience, for that matter, as well. Number 4, engaged community and audience interaction. Fostering this engaged community is really vital for the success of your network. You want to encourage audience interaction by providing avenues for feedback, things like email, social media, dedicated community forums. You want to listen to your audience, address their suggestions, incorporate their feedback into the shows, because engaging with your audience not only strengthens their connection with your network, but also provides valuable insights into their preferences, their likes, their interests. Consider organizing things like live events or special Q&A sessions or exclusive member-only content to further engage your audience. And build a sense of community around the network, because that cultivates loyalty and increases the likelihood of listeners recommending your shows to others. And that helps expand your reach organically. You know what they say, audiences come for the content, but they stay for the people, the podcasters, and the community. Number 5, collaboration and partnerships. This plays a significant role in the growth and success of a podcast network. You want to look for opportunities to collaborate with other networks, hosts, or industry experts. Guest appearances, cross-promotions, joint projects with like-minded creators can all introduce your network to new audiences and build your credibility within the community. And of course, you'll also want to explore sponsorship and advertising partnerships to monetize your network. Develop relationships with brands and companies that align with your network's niche and values. Sponsored segments or endorsements can provide a sustainable revenue stream while maintaining the integrity of your content. Creating a successful podcast network involves more than just producing and distributing content. It also requires attention to legal considerations to ensure compliance, protect intellectual property, and reduce potential risks. So let's dive into some of the most important legal steps in creating a podcast network. First off, business structure and registration. You have to decide on the appropriate legal structure for your network. Now, that could be that you operate as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, but more often, after looking at all the facts and the overall situation, issues like risk and liability protection, tax implications, capitalization, management and ownership arrangements, I'm usually going to recommend a limited liability company or sometimes a corporation. Now, of course, you should consult with an experienced attorney and probably your accountant to determine the best structure for your specific needs. And then register the entity with the appropriate government authorities. File your articles of organization or incorporation, get any necessary business licenses or permits. You have to comply with local, state, and federal regulations. That's crucial to ensure the legal operation of your network. Next, contracts and agreements. Develop good contracts and agreements to govern the relationships your network has with hosts, with guests, contributors, and all the other personnel and the vendors involved in your network. These agreements will need to address things like intellectual property rights, who owns things, who owns the content, who's in charge of various aspects, creative control, business control, compensation, confidentiality, non-disclosure terms, termination, those kinds of things. Now, obviously, as an attorney, I'd say this, but don't try to do this stuff yourself, at least not the first time out of the gate. Work with an attorney experienced in entertainment or media law to draft these agreements and make sure they're adequately protecting your interests and complying with relevant laws. And if your network includes advertising or sponsorship arrangements, you're also going to need agreements that outline the terms and conditions of those deals, payment terms, deliverables, compliance with advertising and disclosure regulations, those kinds of things. Now, intellectual property issues really wind up in the spotlight for podcast networks. Copyright ownership for the network's content assets absolutely needs to be addressed. And you have to make sure that your network's content doesn't infringe on the intellectual property rights belonging to other people. As a network, you can actually be held vicariously liable for the content that your member creators provide. So you have to make sure that they understand and do what's necessary to ensure that the music, sound effects, or any other copyrighted material that's used in their podcasts are properly licensed or fall under fair use exceptions or are otherwise allowed to be used. And it's also wise to develop a trademark strategy to protect your podcast network's name, logo, or any other distinctive branding elements you might have. Run a trademark search to ensure the chosen name or logo doesn't infringe on any existing brands. And again, consult with a trademark attorney to file for trademark protection and registration for the things that you feel are valuable. Now, as a podcast network, privacy and data protection is important, just like for any other online business. You might be collecting or processing personal data from your listeners or website visitors, so you have to comply with the privacy laws, especially if you have listeners or visitors from the European Union, where the General Data Protection Regulation, that's GDPR, is in play. But this is true across most countries now in the world, and here in the US, best advice is to comply with California's privacy rules. That means you got to create a privacy policy. It has to clearly explain how you collect and use and store and share personal data, as well as the rights that individuals have about their data. You want to implement appropriate data security measures to protect personal information from unauthorized access or breaches. And having a policy is great, but you also have to implement it and follow your own rules. And last but not least, disclaimers and other kinds of legal compliance tasks that you have to get away with or get taken care of, including things like disclaimers in your podcasts and website and other promotional materials to clarify any legal limitations or responsibilities that you might expose yourself to. For example, disclaimers could address the accuracy of information provided, whether the podcast is entertainment or educational in nature, how accurate is the information you're using, and any potential risks or liabilities that are associated with the content. If you're sharing instructional advice, you want to make sure that it's not going to get people into the wrong kind of direction or into harm's way. If you're sharing medical or legal information, you want to be clear that you're not offering specific advice. Just like this show isn't offering any specific advice, we speak in general terms and so on. Just make sure that you're keeping the audience fully informed of the scope of how they can rely on it and when they shouldn't. And then you're going to need to make sure that you and your creator members are also following the other applicable laws and regulations, things like the Federal Trade Commission guidelines on endorsements and advertising disclosures. This means you got to disclose any affiliations, sponsorships, compensation arrangements between your show, the hosts, and the brands that they're talking about or the people that they're having on as guests. You've got to maintain transparency for the audience. So building a successful podcast network really requires careful attention to things like compelling content, branding and marketing, the technical infrastructure, of course, and having an engaged community and strong relationships. Plus, it involves navigating a bunch of legal considerations to protect your business, your content, and your audience. Now, remember, building a podcast network is a long-term endeavor. It's not going to happen overnight. It requires dedication, adaptability, and a genuine passion for delivering exceptional content and providing great service. If you focus on these aspects, you will be able to create a network that resonates with listeners, expands the reach, and establishes a reputable brand in the podcasting landscape. And that is a network that will thrive in the ever-changing world of podcasting. That's going to be it for this episode of Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and I'll be back again in about a week with another episode. See you real soon. This episode is brought to you by Easy Legal Forms and Templates for Podcasters. If you're a legit podcast pro, you want to protect your intellectual property and ensure that content is used appropriately. Easy Legal Forms and Templates for Podcasters can help. Our form store at podcastlawforms.com provides a variety of legal forms and templates specifically for podcasters, including host and co-host agreements, DMCA takedown notices, release forms, and much more. With these easy downloadable templates, you can customize the forms you need in just minutes. Plus, our affordable bundle and a la carte pricing makes it easy to get the protection you need without breaking the bank. Visit podcastlawforms.com today. Easy, legal, affordable forms and templates for podcasters. podcastlawforms.com.